I put it out this morning, and I just asked you guys whether you thought the ego was a good thing. And it came back as 70% or so of you said no. So perhaps we can have a chat about this and see what we all think, shall we? Hello, hello. So, what is the ego? What is it? Are you born with it? Is it given to you at some point? So in Latin, the word ego literally translates to I, right? I am sorry, I am vulnerable, I am neha. Um, and it basically is the way the mind defines itself, right? So it's the mind's definition for who you are, right? And certain parts of your ego are given to you when you're born, like your name, your gender, your nationality, and other parts of you, your family, your last name, things that are given to you as part of the things that you grow up with. And then other things we kind of pick up along the way and we assimilate along the way based on our interactions with our family members, based on our experiences growing up, especially in our formative years until the age of about 6 or 7 years old. I had a friend of mine yesterday tell me we're kind of walking around in a theta state till about the age of 6. So we're kind of sponges absorbing everything and kind of creating our own identities on the inside that kind of solidify a little bit more after the age of 6 or 7. But as we go through life, there are some tendencies that get extremely solidified into, like, ingrained into our very being, and others that we're not so afraid of letting go of and kind of allowing ourselves to ebb and flow and add new things to our identity. So as long as this ego is healthy, as long as we feed ourselves a healthy dose of this thing called our ego, our personality, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing. It helps us identify and helps us create a uniqueness about ourselves, right? We're all extremely different people. We're passionate about different things. We want to serve the world in different ways. We want to find ways to express our individuality, and that individuality comes from a place of ego, right? I mean, if the world was full of nehas, I wouldn't complain about it at all because I think neha's pretty awesome. But that would not be the right thing, right? So it's a good thing that we all have egos. It's what makes us different as well and allows us to express ourselves and our passions in different ways. A good healthy dose of ego also increases willpower. It increases our resilience in the time of stress and in tough times. Our resilience, our ways in which that we show up to tough situations is from a place of ego, that we want to move forward, we want to get through stuff, we want to be able to build a better life, look forward to a better tomorrow. All of that stuff comes from a place of ego. Your ego is also what actually makes you vulnerable. I am sorry, I forgive you, I love you, I am okay letting you know that I don't have all the information and that I need to learn and grow, right? That comes from a place of ego too. So your ego is a really, really amazing thing. Part of what yogis and the Buddha also talks about is allowing yourself to transcend the mind. Now, this is where it gets interesting, right? Practices like yoga, where we move into a place of trying to create a little bit of separation from our capital self and our small self. The small self being the ego, and the capital self being the being. And the reason that distinction is a little bit necessary as well, in my humble opinion, is that we get completely identified with this ego. And this ego, because it is a creation of a physical mind in a physical body, this physical body comes with limitations as well, right? And we start to believe that we are these extremely limited beings, when in fact, we are not. We are so much more than that. And there are so many parts of the yoga practice that I have personally encountered that allow me to experience that, right? Whether it's meditation or even the physical practice for that matter. But the reason that people want us to, or masters, great masters, have wanted us to transcend the mind or to create the separation between mind and self is because they want us to come out of this space of limited belief, right? It's that we get so comfortable living and believing that we are only this, that we are not allowing ourselves to be potentially so much more. And that's pretty much it. I mean, if you come into the practice more and more, I feel like, even things in the physical practice, like I was teaching an arm balancing class today, the arm balances in themselves are beautiful postures, and you have to kind of understand technical stuff and build strength to be able to come into them and overcome things like fear. We'll go over fear in just a moment. But, they are the different postures that we do in our physical practice are meant to help us create this slight bit of separation, right? We kind of talk about this idea of watch your mind, watch what you are thinking, watch what you are believing about yourself, watch the judgments that you pass on yourself, all these habits, all this deep kind of listening that we do as we go through the practice as well allows us to know that you are not the one who is actually thinking these thoughts. You are not the one that is actually having this conversation. You are the one who is listening to this conversation happen. You are the one who is listening and observing these thoughts. So you are something more than just the mind. The thing with arm balances and things like inversions as well is they also teach us our capacity, right? If we are able to overcome things like fear, if we are able to break our mind's boundaries and move into things that seemed quite impossible to do, then what are we holding ourselves back from? That's the really important question, right? Because if we live in this square box called our mind's ego, what we're potentially allowing ourselves to be is a fraction of what we're actually capable of being in this gift that is given to us of called a human body, right? So the difference, the distinction is important, not because we want to kill our ego completely, because that's really not possible. It's like saying, I want to get rid of my heart and still have a working and functioning body. The mind has it's got a function, right? Your mind's function is to protect you in this physical body, but that's not all you are. So there is a need for this distinction to be made so that you realize that your mind is an organ like anything else in your body, like your liver, like your lungs, like your heart. It has a function to perform, and when we are able to tap into its functionality and use it well, it can be a force of nature that propels us forward. It can be the best thing, create the most amazing inventions, create the most fantastic life that we can live for ourselves, right? Because it's that place that we build our courage from. It's where our self-esteem comes from. It's where our self-confidence comes from to move into bigger and better situations, to think bigger and better dreams, to move into that place of limitlessness, potentially. But what tends to happen as we grow up, especially it kind of begins, and all of you wonderful people out there who are parents, please think about the language that you use with your children, right? It begins, I personally believe, again, my humble opinion, with the word no. I feel like there is this kind of fear that we start to instill the moment we tell our children without explaining to them what the issue is, just by saying no, and we cut things off. I'm not going to tell you why, I'm not going to explain things to you, but no, don't do this, don't do that, this is bad for you, no, don't behave this way, don't say these words, don't dress this way. I think, and then as we grow up, we come up in a society that has a similar way of molding us into the way that we need to be, right? Society is most comfortable when we conform. Society is not about expressing individuality and running off and having a passionate life. It's about, doing the things that people before you have done and the people before have done, and keeping everything and everyone super comfortable around you, kind of thwarting what your intuition has to say, thwarting what your heart has to say, and just going into this mind space and moving from this egocentric mind space, right? And what tends to happen when we live in society is that we drive like everybody else. We drive to work and we drive back home and we repeat every single day. What tends to happen as well when we live in societies is that there is a lot of fear-based incentives to be able to get up and do the things, a lot of fear-based incentive and motivation. And that kind of throws our ego off kilter, right? When we're operating from a place of fear and scarcity, our egos are not going to function properly at all. There is no vulnerability there. There is no connection to self. There is just, I must get up and do this, otherwise I will not be able to survive, right? So your ego kind of constantly keeps you in this place of fear. It constantly keeps you in this place of fight or flight. And that's really, really unhealthy. That's when we start to make really bad decisions for ourselves and our family members. That's when we start to give in to things like addiction, where we start to question our own self-worth, where we start to lose our individuality, where we start to lose our self-esteem, and we start to go into places like depression. I'll give you a wonderful example from my own life. In last week's chat, I spoke about addiction and I spoke about alcoholism. It's it kind of came from that same place. I was absolutely petrified of letting my parents down, of letting my fiance down, of letting my bosses down. And so to kill all those horrible things that my mind was saying, to keep me in the state of fear, to keep me in the state of insecurity, I took to drinking to numb everything out. So when we're in this state of fear and scarcity and moving from that place constantly all day long, A, it's really exhausting, and B, it's extremely unhealthy, because what tends to happen, if you've ever listened to the language that your mind uses to speak to you, I guarantee you there's no way in hell that you would ever speak to anybody in that way. No way. Not to another person out loud. Yet we allow ourselves to talk to ourselves in that way, in that horrible, demeaning, degrading, judgmental way that completely self-sabotages. We're in this constant cycle of self-sabotage. The ego is there to keep you alive, right? Whatever it does to keep you alive. If you're moving from a place of fear and scarcity, it's going to create the box around you, and it's going to make that box smaller and smaller and smaller. So to make you safer and safer and safer, the things that you're going to be allowed to do according to your mind are going to be fewer and fewer and fewer, to the point where you're living a really, really small life, scared to make any decisions in any manner whatsoever, right? And so again, masters want us to transcend the mind, because you're not about this small life. You're not about this ego space. You are that and so much more than that, right? So if we take the example of learning how to handstand, if you watch a child do it, they don't have a care in the world, they get upside down, and they've learned it in 5 minutes. Yet the same person at the age of 30, you ask that person to handstand, aka me, and it's taken me 5 years to get confident going upside down and being able to share my experience of being upside down. It's taken a lot of time for me to unlearn all the no's to get to a place of, yes, I can do this. And if I'm able to do this, then what else am I capable of, right? So it's about understanding that you can transcend this mind. And meditation for me has been a huge changer in the game. Yes, physical practice brings you into a place of awareness. It starts to create this connection for you within yourself. You start to learn that it's actually possible to turn the volume down on this really, really shouty mind and turn the volume up on your intuition and your heart. So I read somewhere recently, it's a silly thing that we say, you know, you listen to your heart. Your heart is exactly a muscle. Your heart is a muscle. It doesn't have a voice. It doesn't have a personality. It doesn't have, you know, any of the things that we kind of describe in terms of the heart. But what we're trying to say here is we're talking a little bit more about the chakra as well, right? So we work on opening up that intuition space. We start to work on opening up that space of deep listening, of this deep sense of trust. Speaking of chakras, the ego belongs to the Manipura chakra, which is your third chakra, your solar plexus. That is also where your organs live. That is where your ego and your self-esteem comes from. If that chakra is not working properly, if it's blocked, obviously on a physical level, you're going to have all kinds of digestive issues. But it's also, if you're strong enough, that's where your gut instinct comes from, right? And that kind of is your heart space. That's what we're talking about. Mammals out in the wild have a very strong instinct. Over time, we're living in these societies in safe zones and safer zones and safer zones. And so we've lost our instinct, absolutely. We don't trust it, we don't use it, we don't even listen to it. Part of the yoga practice and the yoga journey is starting again to tune out the mind in order to turn up the volume on your gut instinct, to turn up the volume on your intuition. And that's really important stuff. It's really, really important stuff. It's that connection to yourself. So again, when I was going through my alcoholism, what was happening for me was that obviously my liver was getting damaged, which is part of my solar plexus, and all the organs around it were getting affected too. My self-esteem was extremely low. I was moving from a place of fear. It's interesting to me that my whole journey, my yoga journey, especially for the last couple of years, maybe not the last maybe 1 or 2 years, but the majority of my practice has been about building a strong core. Now, when you work on physically building a strong core, you're actually working on strengthening your solar plexus. I didn't know why I had to do this. I didn't know why I had to be strong in my center. I just knew that my core had to be really strong. So it's really interesting that I was already moving into making my solar plexus really strong in order to build my self-confidence, in order to remove myself from this place of fear and anxiety and stress and come back into a place of self-confidence, of self-trust, of self-love. So there's a lot more that we can continue to talk about here. But coming back to this whole idea of whether your ego is necessary, it is, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing to feed your ego because it is your confidence, it's your self-esteem, it is you, right? And you want to be proud of yourself, you want to be amazing, you want to break through barriers, you want to live the best life that you can possibly live, and your ego will make that possible for you. But there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. When we cross over into a place of arrogance, that becomes so ugly so quickly. Right? So you want to walk that fine line. And we all know that balance is so hard. It's one of the hardest things to do is walk that tightrope line and not fall into a place of arrogance, because arrogance and imbalance in that place of ego will quickly turn into fight or flight mode and will shut off your intuition, will shut off your vulnerability. So keep breathing, keep doing the work. Keep meditating. I think meditation is so key to keep you connected to both the best part of your mind and the best part of your heart. There is one of my favorite poets, Mark Nepo. He says, the longest journey that you will ever make is from your mind into your heart, from your head into your heart. And I think it's so true because, it's admitting the first part of that process, the first part of that journey is almost like you have to admit that you've gone too far into your mind and you have to start to walk a few steps back. But when you can have those two parts of yourself in a lot of symbiosis and a lot of balance, it's beautiful because your intuition will move you into a place of a passionate life, and your mind will assist you in how to move forward in that path and on that road to your passion. I remember Sheetal Rajan, who is an amazing healer in Dubai as well. You know, she said, you know, whenever you have things like fear or anxiety show up in your life, don't shut them off as wrong. Like, don't compartmentalize your feelings and emotions into good or bad. There is no good and bad when it comes to feelings. Everything is coming up for a reason, right? So if you're walking down a dark alley and you know, there is a little bit of fear in your body, it's your ego, it's your physical body, it's your ego trying to protect you and saying, hey, listen, this does not feel safe. And what you should do in those moments, instead of trying to thwart your fear and say, nope, I don't want to feel it, this is a bad thing, I don't want to feel it, invite that fear in. Allow it to live in your body and say, yes, fear, thank you. Yes, mind, thank you. Yes, ego, thank you. I love you. Thank you for allowing me to feel this fear. I get it. But trust me, I will keep us safe. Trust me, I will keep us safe. And you continue walking down that alley, right? So allow things to show up. Your ego is an amazing thing. All it's trying to do is take the best care of you. So allow it to do that in the healthiest, most beautiful way that you can, while keeping your heart alive, while keeping your gut alive, while keeping your intuition alive. So yes to ego, all right? Yes to ego, but in good size doses. All right? Have a beautiful rest of your day. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Tons and tons of love, grace, and gratitude.